While at UCLA, you met this outstanding athlete, Mr. Jackie Robinson. Please tell us about your first meeting, when you met him.
Okay. At UCLA, the black students gathered almost daily in Kirchhoff Hall, which is just a big hall. And it was a place for us to meet and kind of socialize together. We were very separate from white students. The only time we mixed with them is at games, you know, football games and basketball games, that kind of thing. And in class, of course. But we met every day. One day, and Jack was big man on campus at that time because I went to UCLA in 1940, and he had been there in 1939. In fact, he'd been there in 1938, so he was almost a senior, and I was a freshman, a lowly freshman, who didn't feel lowly. And a friend of his, Ray Bartlett, who was also on the football team, brought him into Kirchhoff Hall. And there was a lot of flutter around him. I mean, girls and boys too, because he played football, basketball, baseball, and track. He was a track star. And I just kind of eyed him from a distance, you know. I had always been cautious with boys, never had a real boyfriend. I had this one friend who used to come to Manual Arts High School every day after school and walk me home, and without touching me ever.
Yes.
And I made all kinds of rules around that. And in fact, I told him he could never kiss me until he joined my church, and I turned 16.
You made that rule.
I made
not
that
your
rule.
Parents.
No, my mother didn't need to worry at all.
Yes.
She had to worry on the other side. Is this woman ever going to be a sexual being or whatever? But so I was a little wary and distant. I didn't rush over with all the others to greet him and meet him. I wanted to see him from a distance.
Maybe that's what appealed to him, too.
And it may be.
Yes.
The thing that impressed me was he was as black as human beings get in color. But he always wore these white dress shirts. And speaking of identity and, you know, how do you dress yourself to meet your own expectations, I wondered how a man so black could be comfortable in these white shirts that just showed him up as ebony, you know? So that impressed me because I thought you had to have a lot of confidence to do that, and a lot of belief in yourself, and a lot of racial pride, and all those positive things, and that, I liked that. And then he was, another trait that I saw a lot of, and is my favorite and most important one, there's a humility about him that I liked. I cannot tolerate arrogance and self-importance and all those kinds of things. And he had none of that. And he just came in and blended in with the students and kind of accepted their greetings of him in a positive way. And so I started assessing who he was before he actually met him. And then I of course found him he was very handsome. And
Indeed,
so
yes.
I was very attracted to him initially. And the only way that I made any move toward him was I found out where he parked his car. We all came to school in parking in cars. I had a little old rusty Model A or something. And I found out where he parked his car. So I managed to park my car near his car. So when he came to school, I just happened to be in the parking lot if I could manage that. And sort of give him a little signal. And so we just began to get together and date and whatever.
And you stayed at UCLA?
UCLA at that time only had a pre-nursing course. That's 2 years. And then they sent us to San Francisco. University of California at San Francisco was where we finished. And we had 3 years.
Oh, 3 years.
3 years. It was a 5-year program.
I see.
Clinical program and academic program.
Yes.
So we actually worked in the hospital in San Francisco in the latter 3 years.
And now, what happened to Mr. Robinson? Did he finish UCLA?
He did not finish. He left in his senior year.
Oh,
his
why?
eligibility was up, and much to my distress, he left. His eligibility he had played sports at PJC, Pasadena Junior College, and he could only play 3 years at UCLA, not 4.
Ah.
And so he decided, well, his eligibility was up,
Oh.
and his mother needed help, he said, although she'd managed all those years to support herself. And so he left and took a job at Atascadero, which is a youth camp.
Did he ever finish later on in life?
He never finished it later on in life, and it was always something. He never said he was going back, but Mr. Rickey used to say, Jack, you just got to take time off and go back and get your degree.
Yes.
He never saw a reason to get a degree. He said, I'm doing a lot, I'm doing everything, I don't really need a degree.
You and Mr. Robinson announced your engagement relatively early on, but weren't married until February the 10th, 1946.
Right.
What prompted that delay?
I did, in part. Jack was in the Army for almost 3 years in that period while I was in school. And I felt I'd seen girls get married and not finish college, or get married and get pregnant and not be able to finish college. And I was just dead set on I was going to finish, and that was my priority, and nothing else was going to interfere with that. And I just stuck with that plan. And Jack was, first he thought, well, 5 years of engagement, I mean, that's a long time. And then he said, all right, you'll finish that, and then I'll finish what I have to. The other thing, he had to get a job before I was ready to get married to him. He did not have a job. He did not have a job. And he was going to do this or maybe that, and that didn't suit me.
You were always so practical, weren't you, Ms. Robinson?
I always had 5-year plans. When I was 10 years old, I had 5-year plans. I really did. And they give you a sense of direction and things to strive for, and you know what steps you have to take. And I've been doing that all my life.
That is fantastic, especially because you met this very well-known college athlete, and he was handsome, and you didn't fall into that very new, young love kind of idealism. I mean, you looked at the real picture. That's really quite commendable. For another young person, a young woman especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I was always, even very little, young, and I'll go back to my picture of Rachel and 5 years old, very practical.
Yes, obviously. That is great.
And maybe not moved enough by emotion, but a strong feeling of commitment to what I wanted to do, as well as to the life that I could foresee us getting into at some point in time. And Jack finally went along with that, and I was lucky that he would.
Yes, of
that
course.
He would wait, and that he would
it was worth it.
encourage me to finish, and that kind of thing.
Hooray.
But
to
that's
him.
what I'm telling you, that men were my allies. I made them my allies.
I mean, that is just wonderful for him, too, that he supported your wishes, your commitment to your career and your education and so forth. But when you took Mr. Robinson to meet your parents, what were their reactions to him individually?
My father was jealous. I knew he was jealous. He tried to put it to me this way: what is that senior, big man, athlete want with you, that freshman, that little person? He tried to make a derogatory statement about it. But I knew he was jealous because I belonged to him, and to him alone. And he wasn't letting go with any kind, unless he looked him over carefully.
And you had not had a boyfriend prior to
and
this,
I hadn't had a boyfriend except Eddie, who would hold my hand and walk me back and forth to school and never kissed me.
But Mr. Robinson obviously looked like the kissing kind,
right?
Oh,
he knew that was a real challenge. And so he was very, I wouldn't say cold, but he wasn't very welcoming. My mother, on the other hand, was very enthusiastic. She was all very excited, and she thought he's a Christian man. She knows he goes to church. He talked about he always prays, and his spiritual beliefs were there for everybody to examine. He was very close to his church. His best friend was Carl Downs, who was the reverend in his church. And so she thought he was ideal in every way and had great prospects. And she, the only thing she complained about, at the dinner table, he told her that he didn't eat vegetables, that he only ate potatoes and sometimes a tomato. And so she said, well, I don't know how he's going to manage, and she knew that I'm vegetables and fruits and, a health Nick and all that. How are you going to make out with this man that just eat meat and potatoes, But it was a simple thing, and I told her that the day would come when he would eat vegetables. I'm sure I meant that.
Yes, and it did. Right?
And it did. When he had children, they'd say, "Where are your vegetables, Dad?"